back with another episode of the High Ground powered by Premier Companies, and we have our normal in-house guest is virtual today. We're going to have Aaron Bledsoe talk a little bit about grain and the WASDE reports and the Pro Farm Tour, and we're actually getting into Labor Day weekend. It's Friday, right before Labor Day weekend, and several speculations out there that people will start next week, depending on what the weather does. They'll start selling some corn, so it's time to begin to put some numbers to this harvest season and markets, and we want to remind everybody that as we do talk about these numbers, this is from a speculative standpoint. At this point in time, we're not making market recommendations. We intend for you to call Aaron or Jason, our facilities, directly as we get into actual marketing plans. But it is fun to talk about these speculative numbers and see what these crop tours look like.
That sounds like a good disclaimer. So,
yes, right.
Just in case somebody missed that,
right.
That's what that was.
Yeah, that was a disclaimer. Absolutely. Yeah, we don't want that call later. Now, you guys said, so, and it'd just be Aaron. I mean, the rest of us wouldn't take the fall, but Aaron would. So, Aaron, we're going to kick it off to you. You go ahead and jump in a little bit, and we'll want to talk about Pro Farmer versus USDA. So, tell us what you know for now.
Yeah, so... Yeah, I would probably be fielding those conversations that you would be pushing my direction. So, and we are getting a lot of them just because of how volatile the market is right now. We're getting close to harvest kicking off down here. We've had a couple guys go, but they've got some wet premium contracts going, so they're going after some corn that's a little greener than what most people would go after. But yeah, the volatility has definitely got us all over the board. I mean, just last week we went up like 80 cents on some beans, and now we're back down where we basically gave all that up this week. So it's been a crazy couple of weeks in the grain market.
In a week's time. Basically in a week's time.
And last week everybody was watching the Pro Farmer Tour, and that really pushed this market up. Each and every day it was, I don't want to say doom and gloom, but it was a rallying cry for all the bulls out there saying, yeah, I told you, the yield's not what the USDA says it is. And then this week, we've basically given it all back.
And the Pro Farmer Tour, Aaron, it's the first part of September 2022. So what is the Pro Farmer Tour? How come that's set in effect?
Yeah, so that's where, the Pro Farmer Tour, it's where they send scouts out through the big corn belt and soybean belt. Okay. They hit Iowa, Illinois, Nebraska, Minnesota, Indiana, Ohio. They hit the big game changers. South Dakota they hit as well. And what they found was that the corn crop's not what the USDA is saying. Now, if you look at what Pro Farmer has done before, the tours have done, last year they hit it out of the ballpark. I mean, their estimate was you couldn't have gotten any closer to what the final USDA number was. So if you look at it from last year, the Pro Farmer seems like a very reliable source in predicting where these yields will be. And they kept saying that the yields weren't quite as good as what the USDA said. So nationally, the USDA backed theirs off from 177 down to 175. 175.4, and the Pro Farmer came in and said nationally we're going to get down to 168.1. So there's a big difference there. USDA started out at 177, they dropped it down to 175.4 in August, and then the Pro Farmer Tour kicked off about a week and a half later, and they are throwing an estimate out there at 168.1, and that's a big deal. That is a very big deal.
Well, there's some pretty big movers out there from what they are. Some differences between what the Pro Farmer found. South Dakota sticks out as USDA at 147 versus Pro Farmer at 122. Those are bigger. There's 5 bushel difference lower on the Pro Farmer Tour in Illinois. Iowa down 7 bushels, and Indiana USDA forecasted to be 189, and Pro Farmer is saying 177. So it looks to me like that's across the board. It's 15 down from 190 to 175 in Ohio. So They didn't come in higher than USDA on any state, and some of them, I mean, 17 bushel. Some of that's pretty substantial.
Or, Aaron, as a Pro Farmer, is that independent from USDA? Is that
yes?
So no connection there.
No connection. They don't. This is not a group that's going out there making a lot of money off of this thing. This is them, more of like an editorial type thing. A lot of agricultural websites really latch onto this. They do have these guys know what they're doing. Obviously, last year they pinned this crop almost to the 10th of what it actually turned out to be. So these guys are independent from USDA. The men and women go out there, check. They're basically highway pounders. They drive them down the highway, get off on the county roads, and they scout fields all over the place. And they get an average, and then they blast that out to the national news, and that's where we're at right now.
Well, I read that this is their 30th year on the crop tour. 2022 is their 30th crop, and there's 1,500 samples goes into these data sets. So, I mean, I would assume that this is like everything else, and that there are people that are for it, people that are against it, depending on what kind of information they come out with. But it does seem like they do a thorough job.
Yeah, they're not just driving around looking for the good fields or just the bad fields to skew the results. They seem to do a very good job of giving a fair assessment as to what this crop looks like. Locally down here around the Lagodi area, I would say we're probably better off than most of the nation is. We've been very fortunate. We were very dry in June, but we've been fortunate across the Premier territory as a whole, I would say, agronomically. We've been kind of in a breadbasket area. I mean, we definitely don't have the crop that we did last year. We're not going to have a record crop, but I think we're going to have at least an average or above average crop. And it's hard to think about an average crop anymore because the last couple have been very, very good. That average tends to get thrown in our back of our mind as a bad crop, and it's not. It's just an average crop. It's just that we've had several years since we've had a true bad crop. But yeah, to get back on the Pro Farmer, I mean, if that yield plays out to come in somewhere around that 168.1, that's a game changer for our ending stocks. And I've got a sheet here for U.S. corn supply and demand stats from 08 and 09 crop all the way up to what the projection is right now, and it's based off the USDA information. So right now, USDA is saying if we do harvest at 175.4, that comes in with a total production of about 14.4 billion bushels for corn, with usage around 14.5. Ending stocks come in about 1.4 billion bushel left over. That puts us. It's a lot of numbers to say that the ending stocks to use rate is just under 10%. And I've been on here before and said anytime that you get below 10% on ending stocks to use for corn, the world gets a little uncomfortable at that level. We're okay, but we're sitting on the fence of not being okay as well. If you go with that 168.1, if you just ran the numbers, you get down to a 5.5% stocks to use rate, and that is astronomically low. That's lower than the 2012 drought usage. And if we kept usage the same, that means we are way underpriced. But the reality is we won't get that low because there will be demand destruction. As that yield goes down and as the stocks to use rate gets a little slimmer, prices go up, and that teeters usage. So at some point, supply and demand will equal themselves out to where we get what we need in the pipeline, but not more than we need. But that's the reality of what we're looking at right now is if this yield does truly pop down about 7.3 bushels nationally, we're going to have a pretty tight crop. And prices indicate that. Now, if you look at prices in this ending stocks position that we're at or what USDA is projecting versus 2012, because everybody likes to talk about that, and completely different scenario. That was a complete crop failure. for all intensive purposes in 12 rolling into 13. That year we were looking at U.S. average farm price of $6.89. We're at $6.65 right now, and the ending stocks is, we're 2 to 3% higher projected than what the 12-13 crop was. So the fact that we have an average farm price or a projected average farm price almost as high as the 12 and 13 crop, that kind of makes me a little nervous that there might be some pressure to the downside. But we're sitting pretty good right now. I think these prices give us an opportunity, especially for guys that have to move stuff this fall, to lock some stuff in.
Aaron, you said, of course, we know, I think you've said before, high prices cure high prices, and there will be demand destruction. If, I think already I've got a couple articles over here, and, consumers have changed their protein, their meat purchasing due to the inflation. And so, but what does that mean in the very short term? If we find out here pretty quickly within the next few months, I guess I'm gonna string a bunch of ifs here together, so I probably should add another disclaimer, right? But if Pro Partners turn out right and we do end up around 5.5%, I mean, what will that do in the short term before it fixes itself? I mean, that would drive higher prices, commodity prices, right? Until the market hit an equilibrium again.
Yes, yeah, that would be correct. Yeah, we would see some pretty sizable rallies in the near term, and what I mean by near term is we won't really know what this crop is for another 4, 5, 6 months, unless USDA is very quick on the trigger in lowering that yield. It takes a while for us just to get through harvest, collect all the data, and then be able to pump that data out. But if we can get into December, January timeframe, and as the reports go the rest of this year, we could see some sizable run-ups. But we could also see a backlash, and that's what we've been seeing. So if this crop's a little better than what Pro Farmer says, or comes in close to what USDA says, then we're sitting on really high prices compared to some of the other years that we've had at these ending stocks level. So it's kind of we're tiptoeing right now. There's a lot of unknown.
Tremendous risk. Not a lot of farmers have sowed corn at the numbers we have today, right? I mean, so the risk being, and I think if I go back to 2012, I mean, the people that didn't make the right decisions, that didn't, they got rewarded, and that kind of, those things stick in our minds whenever we have an outlier scenario that shouldn't happen, and then it pays off, and we hope for that again. And I think this could set us up where I see now why we added all the disclaimers is the indicators are there, but the risk is tremendous, right?
Oh yeah.
If you don't sell, if you don't lock in some profits today.
Yeah, and we've talked about that before on that. The reward is high, but it costs a lot to play this game right now, and I think this is one of those things where we're looking at high input prices and high commodity prices, and at this time, I think we really need to be focused on being risk managers, because those are the farms and those are the growers that really knock it out of the park in these types of years. Last crop that we had, the 21-22 crop, we had reasonable crop prices into that one. Those are inputs that we bought all the way back in fall of 20 and put in the ground in spring of 21, and we had a really good run up in commodity prices. So there was some very, very appetizing profits to be made on corn with a very big crop as well. This year we've got high input prices, and we've got a crop that is not a record yield from what it looks like, and prices that are still high, and we're still higher than last year, but that margin of error is a lot smaller. So I think it definitely pays to be on your toes and to have that figure on that, or your finger on the trigger, to lock in profit when you see profit. I think once you get a certain amount squared away, if you want to roll the dice and see how this thing plays out, by all means, I don't think you're wrong, because I think there is some top side to this that we have not seen yet. But I would hate to bet the entire farm on it. That's not a place that I would want to. It's not a seat I'd want to sit in right now. The risk is way too high for that.
The penalty for being wrong is going to be severe.
Oh, extremely severe.
Yeah,
extremely severe.
Yep.
Yep.
Hey, while we're on corn, Aaron, and we've talked about the crop tour, so that's all U.S. Information. What's affecting us globally? Which I know Sal's wanting to kick over, so I think maybe we stay corn till we're done with corn, regardless of local, and then we'll kick the beans, and do it that way. So let's stay on corn for a little bit and talk about globally what's pressure in the market. I mean, obviously you're talking about supply shortening up. Indicators say price could go up, and there may be more top end on it, but we know that then that curbs demand, which would then squelch the market. And all of that is just based on whatever our production numbers are right now. What else globally? We beat this Ukraine thing to death, but it's still in the news, and it's still very, very important in the whole grain side. They've shipped some grain. What are you seeing? Tell us about what's happening elsewhere.
Yeah, so globally, I would be looking at China still locking major provinces down. They are entering deals with Brazil now to export corn from Brazil to China. We use a lot of corn here domestically, but anytime you face any kind of export resistance or competition, that's going to put pressure on the national, on the U.S. price. You got to watch for those ships to leave Brazil to go to China with corn. That's new. That's newer to the marketplace. That'll put pressure on the U.S. because they'll think that we're losing export shares. And in reality, that is possible. Obviously, you brought up Ukraine. You've still got that whole fiasco going on in the Black Sea. They are sending stuff out, but it's minute compared to what they are typically doing. But it's more than what the market thought we could get. There for a long time, we didn't think anything would move out of there, because who would have ever thought that a humanitarian corridor would have been struck between Putin and Ukraine? I mean, so any grain that gets out of there is more than what we thought would get out of there at this point. So the more grain that gets out of there, a little bit more pressure will be put on this market. I think one thing that we haven't talked about here lately is the U.S. dollar. I think it hit a 20-year high, and that really puts a dampener on our export availability. Because when it's extremely hard for other currencies to buy our crop, that's tough for us to ship product out. And and the dollar being at that high of a level, that just doesn't affect corn, as in a single corn kernel getting on a boat and going across seas to another country and coming off the boat as a corn kernel. That affects all the corn byproducts. So when you start affecting, high fructose corn syrup or cereals or anything that corn's made out of, alcohol, when you start making that stuff more expensive for other countries to import, that eventually backs up to where the corn price will go down, because it's got to correct itself at some point to make those products a little cheaper and easier to get across seas to other countries. Fuel's been taking a little bit of a shot here lately. They're off the highs on oil. So when you start to see oil come down, you would think corn could possibly start to come down because of the ethanol. That's still to be determined, in my opinion, on the ethanol market globally, because who knows what all these administrations and clean energy is doing to the marketplace. I mean, they contradict themselves every other day. So I don't know how you could ever forecast what that looks like going forward. I think you flip a coin in the air, and it just depends on the day and everyone's mood. But those are the global things I'd be looking at. Brazil sending corn to China, the U.S. dollar, global recession. Oh my gosh, interest rates going up, inflation. And the inflation and interest rates, that's a big deal, as yes, corn could go up more, in a couple, after the first of the year. But a lot of these farmers are facing interest rates they've not seen for quite a while. So the cost of money is pretty high. Yes, you may sell it for a certain dollar amount that's higher than what you could this fall, but you get your money now versus having to wait and pay interest on all the loans and things you have, operating loans that you have out there. You can collect that money now versus waiting until later and having to pay off that expense, that interest expense that you racked up waiting to sell that crop. So there's a fine line between getting more for your bushel, but in reality, it may end up costing you a little bit more because of the interest rates.
Yeah, and the inflation. I've never seen a time where you can watch the inflation. I mean, if you're a consumer and you buy the same item, every week, whether that's a bacon, egg, and cheese biscuit from McDonald's, on your way to work on Monday morning, but you can watch it. I mean, you can see these prices tick up. And let's say you go to the store, and of course we support higher milk prices, and they need to be higher. But you go in there, and what used to be $2.25 a gallon or on sale at the JC store, and now it's $3.30, $3.50, and you can watch these prices tick up. Back to the global point, reading a newsletter from Magnetic Ag. And just said that the exports out of Ukraine, yes, they got a corridor through negotiations with Turkey and the United Nations, but it's not all good news, as Ukraine's expected grain harvest is down 50 million tons from 86 in 2021. So it's down substantially, and those poor folks, doing all this in a in a combat zone. I can't even imagine farming this way. But it looks like their harvest is down, even though their exports will be up.
Yeah, that raises a question of it's going to be a couple of years before, if everybody starts playing nicely, and it doesn't look like they will for any time soon. It's not just getting the crop out of there, like you said, Sal. It's all these crops that are going to be affected in the years to come. I mean, their crop acreage is going to be down because who's going to run the risk of trying to till up some ground or plant some seed and have a landmine go off and blow your planter up?
Yeah, rocks
God forbid it blows up. Yeah, I mean,
rocks are bad enough, but
it'll be a couple of years.
Getting a mine is worse.
Yeah. Yeah, we're like, oh man, we sunk the planter here in Indiana.
Yeah,
and well, they blew the planter up over in Ukraine. So
it sure feels like the 80s again.
I don't know. Yeah, it's an interesting time. There's so many global things that are contradicting each other. If it was just one or the other, I think someone could come up with some kind of plan to work through this. But you've got headwinds and you've got tailwinds in this marketplace. Supply wise, Ukraine won't be what it was. China's shutting down, which makes you think that the supply and the demand may be down lower. Brazil's looking like they could plant a pretty good crop, projecting always to plant a pretty good sized crop. You've got so many things that are just fighting each other on this globally that it's a very, very volatile marketplace right now.
Okay. Well, Aaron, let's jump to beans for a few minutes. Pro Farmer, obviously, they don't do a yield estimate necessarily on beans. They just do pod counts, and that's kind of how that comes out. I mean, it's harder to do that on beans. They come up with a yield assessment based on the pods that they count. But as we look at those numbers, beans reflect a little different story than what corn does. It's either close, and sometimes the Pro Farmer in a state like Iowa, Pro Farmer was a couple bushels better than what USDA said. Down a couple bushels in Nebraska. Indiana was 59 versus Pro Farmer's 59. USDA said Indiana was 60. So Minnesota's 2 over. Pro Farmer's 2 better than USDA in Minnesota, 2 worse in Illinois. I mean, so beans are not looking like they're changing as much. But you've already said that they gain 80 and lose 70 and move. Let's talk about beans a little bit. What you got there? And it's still raining occasionally, so I mean they're finishing hopefully.
Yeah. There's really no. There's always portions of the U.S. where there are weather scares, and my crop is not looking as good as what they say it is, and there's other areas where they're optimistically sandbagging themselves, I think, a little bit on what this bean crop looks like.
And they are hard to guess.
Yeah, they are very hard to guess. Beans hide themselves until the bitter end. But yeah, so overall, USDA said 51.9 in August. Pro Farmer said 51.7. They're neck and neck. Either way, yield looks very good for beans, is what a lot of sources are saying. There are those one-offs in certain areas that look a little rough, but the big players look like they're going to have a pretty good crop. And we're seeing that in the prices. I think anytime we see random export sales pop up, we'll see a little bit of a bump. Anytime we hear anything about China shutting down, any kind of demand loss, we will see pressure on this bean market. I am trying to tell people to be very nimble with beans. Beans have me a little nervous. I think there could be some serious pressure on them if we produce the crop that they're talking about. That would put us at a projected ending stocks to use rate of 5.4. Anytime you get under 5 on beans, that's when we're tight. We're tighter than what we would like to be. So we're right there. But we still have very good prices compared to what the stocks to use rate looks like. I'll talk again about the 12 and 13 crop. We were 14.40 for the U.S. average farm price. We're at 14.35 right now. So we're right there, and this is not a crop failure by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, this crop looks good. Like I said a little bit ago about Brazil on the planting acres going up. They always talk about planting acres going up. Well, we've piggybacked off of 2 seasons now for Brazil where it's been rough on the bean front. And if they get one decent year this year where they bump their acreage back up and they get some decent yields, every year it seems like they keep bumping acreage up total. If we see that happen, there's going to be a lot of pressure on this bean market. Now, there's a lot of buzz in the bean market right now because of all the soy biodiesel, soy byproducts the soybean meal market is really good. I mean, we're crushing very well. There's a lot of demand things going for beans right now, but this is one that at these high prices, this is a great time to lock in some profit on beans, get the cash, take care of some of the loans or operating expenses that you would have out there. This is a great crop to do that with. And this market is telling you, sell it now. Like they are incentivizing, basis is incentivizing you, futures is incentivizing. Move your beans as quickly as you possibly can.
So, Eric, just for clarity, you said that the stock-to-use rate on corn, we'd like to see anytime it gets below 10%, the world gets pretty nervous. And with soybeans, it's below 5%. And we're around 5.5 now on soybeans, correct?
Yeah, 5.5 now.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, I'll quote our agronomist, Glenn Longaball, the story of the soybean yields written in August. And locally, here in southern Indiana, we have had favorable rains in August. I know that early July, we were just, it was dry and we were giving up. And then on July 7th, I believe there was a date that big major rain came through. And man, did it refresh the crops, corn and soybeans alike. So those upper nodes of the soybeans sure look like they're potted out well, and there's a lot of days of soil of moisture holding capacity, water holding capacity in the soil right now. So it does look pretty good for our soybean yields, at least locally.
Yeah, this bean crop from a couple customers I've been talking to, and just always doing a windshield check on most of them. They do look good. But like Ryan said and you said before, man, they hide their yield all the way up until the bitter end. You don't have a great feeling for them until they're ran through the combine and in the grain cart and hit the elevator. But this bean crop, as far as production wise goes, looks like we could have a pretty good crop. Price, I would be looking to lock stuff in right now is what I would be doing, especially absolutely on anything that you can hold. And same goes for corn. If you can't hold it, I would be pulling the trigger now, because yes, we can see some rallies in November, December timeframe, but you're going to have to move the crop in October more than likely. And there's always some pressure in this September, October. Historically speaking, there's always pressure on this market. And this bean crop looks like it could face some more pressure than what we're usually used to.
Okay. Well, they're turning in a hurry. A lot of beans turning yellow and dropping leaves, and so we're going to know. The story's going to be written before too long, obviously, again, coming into Labor Day weekend. So, again, we want to remind everybody that to call you guys personally, Jason and Aaron, call you guys and work through your marketing strategy. And it is a high-stakes game. It always has been a high-stakes game. It just seems higher and more volatile, affected by more things. So we want to make sure that you're sitting down with your marketing specialist and really evaluating your next move for certain. So, Aaron, before we let you go, you're underway with a huge project at your facility. You want to give us a quick recap on what you're having done and what stage of the process you are in?
So, yeah, you can actually see our 386,000 bushel bin, which will be devoted to corn. So our corn capacity has doubled compared to what it was last year. So we should be able to help everybody out in that regards. We have a wet bin that is built as well and upstanding. It's pretty intimidating because it's right along the drive. It's a 25,000 bushel hopper tank. So it's pretty impressive to see. The dryer is, fingers crossed, September started out really well, because yesterday on September 1st, I got a phone call saying that they are going to try to show up next week to start building the dryer. So it's a little behind what we all anticipated. We were hoping to be squared away and testing it out by this point, but we should still have it up and operating for this season. It may not be at the beginning, but we should still be able to dry some corn for the big push of harvest this year.
And next time we talk to you, you'll probably be in a new office, right?
I hope so. Sure, I sure hope so. Everyone seems to be facing the same problems as everybody else. Is stuff that should have been here 2 months ago isn't here, but the things that said they wouldn't be here until October they showed up the next day. So we are still facing the supply issues. Electrical group is really struggling to get some of the little fine-tuning things to make everything run efficiently, but we're going to find a way to make it through. We're going to make a way to get it up and operating for everybody.
Then I heard a rumor that you had the floor was finished and drying, and you had some of our coworkers was curious to see the progress, and they took a walk through the wet floor. Is that right? Should we name names?
Yeah, it wasn't just. No, probably shouldn't name names. It wasn't. It wasn't just them.
It wasn't Sal and I. We can name those names.
Definitely, we can take.
We
them.
were within. We were within 100 miles of it. So.
Yeah, and I can tell you, it wasn't anybody at the grain facility, because they would have heard about it. But
we could just start eliminating a lot of people.
Yeah. I mean, but we are a growing company, so there are a lot of people to eliminate.
Right.
But
it's getting watered down every day.
Yeah. We did. We did have some people, and we had some other contractors that were looking for some things inside the warehouse or inside the office, and they didn't pay attention. They walked across the floor. So, yeah, unfortunately, it was probably the best attempt that I've seen on the floor so far, and then we ended up with footprints on it. So we're having to try her again, but.
Just think how much more you got to appreciate it. If it went easy, you wouldn't appreciate it. So.
Oh my gosh, yeah. It's everyone complained about 2020 being, this 2020 is horrible. 2022, I will tell you, has been a rough year. The next time we have anything where we're like, this year is horrible, I'm gonna put a marker on the calendar for 2 years after that and say, nope, this year's really gonna suck, because all of this is going to snowball and finally come through 2 years later. But It's nothing new. Everyone's facing it. People are facing labor shortages. People are facing product shortages. It's just across the board. I thought we were fairly well insulated. I was, 4 months ago, I was feeling pretty good. I was thinking, we're going to skate by. We're doing something right here. We're doing pretty good. And then it all just kind of came undone. And we've just been trying to get back on track since then. But we're making progress. We've got the bushel app up and going. So if you're a customer out there, even if you don't bring us grain, it's still a great app to pull up. You just got to search for Premier Ag on any of your Droid or iPhone in the Google Play or App Store. Just look for Premier Ag, download that. You can find our cash bids, futures. You'll even find us on there, the High Ground Podcast. It'll say, you can click on that and lead you right to it.
Yeah, we're excited to see you add some storage and pull some customers in, and I think we're going to wrap it for this and let you get back to work, but appreciate it, and want to remind everybody to call you and Jason to get those marketing plans worked out, and for all our viewers and listeners to hit the like and subscribe button as they watch us. And thanks, Aaron, for participating. Thanks, Sal. And this is another episode of the High Ground powered by Premier Companies.